Hello everyone, welcome back. Sorry about Saturday. That was a bustaroo. That was my fault. I thought the equipment that I was using, that I used to record now, I thought I could stream with, but I could not. So when I went and signed on to the live feed, it was offering me to stream using my webcam and stuff like that, which is fine, clearly, but it was just off. And I know some people said it could have been my internet. I have fiber optics, so it shouldn't be that. Could be high traffic. You know, occasionally it screws up for me here, but I didn't know what the deal was. I ran several test things. Didn't have a whole lot of luck. Went through 17 different tutorials and finally got it. I didn't run any more tests. I'm going to mess with that. This coming weekend, I'll be gone. But probably Monday, a week from today, which would be Monday the 3rd, I might go live. Not as that, but just go live just as more tests. Of course, I don't even know when this will be up, so this may come up on the 4th, July 4th. I have no idea. Enough talking. This was a request. Crusades from the Muslim Perspective Medieval History documentary, Kings and Generals. So let's get into it.
The Crusades are a series of religious wars launched by the medieval Christian European kingdoms against the Muslim states of the Middle East with an aim to gain Jerusalem for the Christian realm. Much has been written about the Crusades, many videos have been made on this topic, but most of them share the same shortcoming. The majority of mainstream accounts of the Crusades are extremely Eurocentric, as often only Christian European perspectives on this process are being described. In this video, we're going to talk about the perspective of Muslim chroniclers on the Crusades and their views on the medieval Europeans in general. While the Muslim and Christian states have warred throughout the medieval era, there was not that much contact between these two civilizations. The centers of the respective civilizations were far from each other, and the more regular contacts were only in the peripheries, the Iberian Peninsula, Mediterranean islands, and Anatolia. And most of these contacts contained military conflict. This enabled both sides to have a stereotypical view of each other. Medieval Muslims thought of their contemporary Europeans as savage, warlike barbarians who lacked any sense of hygiene and were backwards in their development. Europe was thought of as a cold, dark, and misty place. At the time, the Islamic world was much bigger, wealthier, and more scientifically developed. Major cities of the Islamic world, like Baghdad, hosted hundreds of thousands of inhabitants, while European cities like Paris and London would have had around 20,000 people each. It probably only increased the condescension of Muslim chroniclers writing about the medieval Europeans before and during the Crusades. But the Islamic world was politically divided. The Abbasid Caliphate was well past its prime, and on the eve of the First Crusade it had become a mere figurehead. Centralized power had weakened, and many small clans based on family ties thrived throughout Syria and Palestine. The Shia Fatimid Caliphate, which ruled over Egypt at the start of the Crusades, was also on the decline on the eve of the First Crusade and had its own fair share of problems. The power on the rise in the Middle East were the Seljuk Turks. By the mid-11th century, they governed over the Abbasid Caliphate in everything but name, and established the Rum Sultanate of Seljuk in Anatolia from formerly Byzantine territories. Right on the eve of the Crusader invasion, the Islamic world had become subject to losses of its main political leaders. In 1092, the Seljuk vizier Nizam al-Mulk, the Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtadi, and the Seljuk Sultan Maksha died. 2 years later, the Fatimid Caliph al-Mustansir died, along with his vizier Bada al-Jamali. Such losses only worsened the disarray in the Islamic world, and
I'm sorry to cut him off, but I've got to believe the answer is going to be yes. But do you think the death of those 5 men are kind of what also encouraged the Christians to come down? Because that would make sense if they've lost 5 leaders that maybe they know of, and I'm not going to say they respect them. I'm not going to say they, they're just kind of like, but he's a name. Well, 5, names, so to speak, die that they know lead tribes of fighters, warriors, whatever. That's got to have something to do with pushing for a battle. Strike now before they can really make changes, or strike now because you don't think that the next person up is going to have that type of ability, that the military ability that the one had. That's my early opinion.
It made the daunting task of the Crusaders to conquer Jerusalem more realistic.
Yeah.
According to mainstream historiography, the era of the Crusades started with the call of Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont in 1095 to rise up and save Jerusalem from Muslims and protect Constantinople. The First Crusade was successful in regaining Western Anatolia for the Byzantine Empire, and most importantly, in the capture of Jerusalem, Tripoli, Antioch, Edessa, and other territories in the Levant, which eventually led to the establishment of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the counties of Tripoli and Edessa, and the Principality of Antioch. The Second Crusade was a failure. It started as a reaction to the fall of the county of Edessa, as French and German armies headed by their kings moved into Anatolia, where they were destroyed by the Seljuks. The remainder of the Crusaders' force perished during and after the failed siege of Damascus. The failure of the Second Crusade ultimately led to the Muslim forces, commanded by Saladin Ayyubid, regaining Jerusalem, which became the key factor behind the mobilization for the Third Crusade. This time the Crusaders were more successful, as some of the iconic medieval European monarchs like Frederick Barbarossa and Richard the Lionheart played an important role in it. The Crusaders managed to regain major parts of the Levant and captured Acre, but the ultimate prize, Jerusalem, was protected by Saladin. The Treaty of Jaffa was signed between Richard and Saladin in 1192, which recognized Saladin's control over Jerusalem, who pledged to allow unarmed Christian pilgrims and merchants to visit the Holy City.
Yeah,
the following Crusades did not...
What a great deal for the unarmed Christians. Because I think if the reverse was true, Richard would not have allowed any unarmed Muslims into England.
not do much better to alter the status quo in the Levant. The original purpose of the Crusades was forgotten, so much that instead of attacking Jerusalem, at one point the Crusader army got meddled in internal Byzantine affairs and captured Constantinople, inflicting an immense blow on the Eastern Roman Empire at the time when it was struggling to contain the ever-increasing Turkic threat. In 1291, the Mamluks of Egypt destroyed the remnants of the Crusader states in the Levant, putting an end to the crusading period from the European perspective. The view of the Muslim world on Crusades significantly differs from the Christian sources. First of all, Muslims did not see the Crusades as a process starting after the speech of Pope Urban in 1095, but rather as a continuation of the Christian or Frankish aggression on Muslim lands from the Iberian Peninsula to Sicily. Similarly, for Muslims, the Frankish aggression did not end with the fall of Acre in 1291, but continued throughout the medieval era, with events like the Reconquista, arguably all the way until the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a state powerful enough to protect the Islamic realm. It is notable that the Muslims of the Levant, who were at the receiving end of the First Crusade, at first thought of the invaders as another mercenary army sent by the Byzantines to plunder their lands. Only after understanding that this time the threat was coming from Europe, the Arab chroniclers started referring to the crusading armies as Franks. One of the first Muslim chroniclers to write about the Crusades was a legal scholar and a preacher at the Great Mosque of Damascus, Ali ibn Tahir al-Salami.
Did the Muslims and the Europeans, did they do business with one another? Or did it stop pretty much, at the, I almost said the border, but it has stopped pretty much when, like, one group would have entered into another religious country. Like Muslims going into a Christian country, Christians going into a Muslim country. Did the business stop there? We're not going to do business with them because they're of a different faith, so they're different people than us, blah, blah, blah. Was there any kind of... what I'm trying to figure out is, outside of the religious aspect, what would cause... Excuse me. What would cause, outside of the religion, Europe to want to dominate there, other than Jerusalem, which I would still deem that religion, because of the Jesus. I keep doing this. I forgot where I was going with all that. Proceed.
6 years after the Crusader conquest of Jerusalem, he presented his account of the Crusader attack in his book, Kitab al-Jihad, the Book of Holy War, which became an important part of medieval Islamic historiography. Al-Salami saw the First Crusade as a continuation of the Christian aggression on the Islamic world, which started with the Norman conquest of Sicily, then continued in Spain, and finally arrived in the Levant. A host of Franks swooped down upon the island of Sicily at a time of division and dissension, and likewise they took possession of town after town in Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus. When reports mutually confirmed the condition of this country, Syria, namely the disagreements of its lords, the discord of its leading men, coupled with its disorder and disarray, they acted upon their decision and set out for Syria, and Jerusalem was the chief object of their desires. They continued zealously in the holy war, jihad, against the Muslims, until they made themselves rulers of lands beyond their wildest dreams. Ibn al-Qalanisi, a chronicler from Damascus, was 23 when the Franks arrived in the Levant. He wrote from first-hand experience about the hardships brought by the First and Second Crusades. Most of al-Qalanisi's writing is the narration of events that happened in this period, but we also see some observations he made about the Crusaders. He recognized their prowess on the battlefield. He spoke of fear imposed on many Muslims by heavy armored mounted Frankish knights. Al-Qalanisi spoke of the Crusader victory over the Seljuks, describing fear caused by it in the Islamic camp. This event, so shameful for Islam, became known. There was a real panic. Dread and anxiety swelled to enormous proportions. In general, Al-Qalanisi played an important role in reshaping the Crusader Frankish stereotype of powerful but savage warriors, who would often commit atrocities, which would continue to impact the writing of future chroniclers. Usama ibn Munkid is another notable chronicler of the Crusades. This illustrious man was born at the start of the crusading movement, and lived a very eventful 93 years, acting as a close aide of different Muslim dynasties and leaders, including Saladin Ayyubid, a poet, a diplomat, a warrior. Ibn Munkid.
Did that say Saladin or he was he worked for Saladin, or was that a different Saladin? Am I saying his name right? I feel like I am.
Warrior. Ibn Munkid both fought the Crusaders and befriended some of their leaders. He maintained the general view of the medieval Christian Europeans held by the Muslims, which was lack of refinement, low intelligence and savagery. Ibn Munkid was critical of medical treatment used by Europeans, but like many other contemporary Arab chroniclers, he recognized their military capabilities. All those who were well informed about the Frank saw them as beasts, superior in courage and fighting ardor, but nothing else. Just as animals are superior in strength and aggression, Franks, God curse them, are the most cautious of all men in war. God curse them was a common phrase of reference to the Crusaders by the Muslim chroniclers. Usama ibn Munkid had first-hand experience of military encounters with the Crusaders as he fought them at the city of Ascalon. But as a diplomat, he also travelled to Crusader states and had quite warm relations with some of its leaders. Ibn Munkid was said to be impressed with their courts and liked that they were not fully autocratic. Ibn Jubayr was arguably the Muslim chronicler with the most animosity and contempt for the Crusaders. Being born in Muslim Spain and experiencing a slow decline of the Muslim presence in the Iberian Peninsula probably predisposed him to a negative attitude towards Christian Europe. He travelled through the Levant on his way to pilgrimage to Mecca at the end of the 12th century, and the Christian occupation made a huge negative impression on him. Ibn Jubayr met refugees from Palestine and northern Syria who left the lands captured by the Crusaders, and understandably carried a lot of resentment and anger towards the foreign invaders. Ibn Jubayr was unhappy with Muslims who decided to continue living in the occupied lands alongside the Christian invaders. He argued,
You can't get mad at them. I understand, but you can't get mad at them because they don't want any part of the fight. They just want to live their life. Maybe they have a child, maybe they have kids. Their whole life is set up to farm or, work at a market, whatever it is. You can't take the blame out on them. Even if, they are your people and they're being oppressed by another group, you can't hate them because they're not turning violent. They just want to live. They're just trying to survive. You can't blame them. They didn't ask for the war, so they don't want any part of it. I get it.
that there is no excuse before God for a Muslim to remain in a city of unbelief, unless he is merely passing through. In the land of Islam, he finds shelter from the discomforts and evils to which he is subjected in the countries of the Christians, as for example, when he hears disgusting words spoken about the Prophet, particularly by the most besotted, or finds it impossible to cleanse himself properly, or has to live among pigs, and so many other illicit things. Beware of entering their lands. You must seek God's pardon and mercy for such an error. Apparently, the occupation of Jerusalem and many other lands in the Levant failed to cause that much resentment and mobilization in the fragmented Muslim world, apart from the refugee communities. Ibn Jubayr tried to change this situation and did his utmost to rally the Muslims against the occupation. Another important Muslim chronicler of the period, Ibn al-Athir, is mostly known for his monumental work, Al-Kamil fi al-Tariq, The Consummate History. He is among the chroniclers who argued that the Christian aggression against the Islamic world started earlier, when Toledo and other cities of Islamic Spain, along with Sicily, were taken by the Christian Europeans. Considered a chief Muslim historian of the crusading period, Ibn al-Athir used his platform to call the Muslims to mobilize and end the occupation of the Levant. He wrote about the fear which grappled the Muslim communities of cities under attack by the Crusaders, along with overemphasizing the Muslim successes in repelling the Crusader aggression, while underplaying Muslim defeats, arguably in attempts to raise Muslim morale for mobilization against the infidels. One of the contemporaries of the latter Crusade period was Abu al-Fida, a participant in the sieges of Tripoli and Acre. He presented accurate facts about atrocities committed by both sides. Namely, he talked about the massacre of the male population of Acre by the Muslim army following the siege, and its women and children being sold into slavery. He described the ultimate decline of the Crusader states following the defeat at Acre, amidst the despair and loss of morale by the Franks. In general, we can trace a trend of Muslim attitudes towards the Crusaders throughout the crusading period. While at first there was more curiosity towards the Crusaders rather than anger, continued occupation and massacre of the Muslim population, such as in Ma'ara, started to change the attitude towards hostility. Gradually, the calls for Muslims to unite and expel the foreign invaders and cease any kind of cooperation started to increase. The impact of the Crusades in the Muslim world is still felt. While for the Christian West, the crusading period is merely an important and curious part of their history, which does not really have much to do with their modern lives. For many Muslims, it's seen as just an early episode of Western aggression, which is still going on today. Some Muslim politicians and opinion leaders still refer to the perceived modern Western attacks on the Islamic world as a continuation of the Crusades.
Okay.
More videos on medieval history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the...
Wow, that was fast. I didn't realize it was 14. I read it as 24 minutes. Oh, I was looking at a different video. Never mind. Okay, that's just me. So this is good. It was interesting. I have a bunch of Crusade Muslim videos requests, and I'm going to do a few of those today. So I'm going to go ahead and end this here. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. And if you've requested something and I haven't done it, then please say it again and say, hey, this is the second time I requested this. I have lists. One list got erased on accident. Another list got moved. So I'm doing my best. Okay. I'm going to end this here, though. Have a good day. Have a good night.